In the first reading, my friends, which, by the way, is one of the earliest parts of New Testament writing, for St. Paul was writing this first epistle to the Thessalonians very early on, probably actually before the first Synoptic Gospels. We have a program of life, and we have amongst this list of items that the Lord is proposing us through the Holy Spirit, things to be cultivated, one which I would like to focus on. It is something which, if you weren't careful, would have passed by unnoticed. Listen. And you became imitators of us and of the Lord, receiving the word in great tribulation, with joy of the Holy Spirit, so that you became a pattern to all the believers in Macedonia and in Achaia. Joy in the Holy Spirit, or joy of the Holy Spirit. Yesterday, I was at the bedside of a dear priest friend of mine, who perhaps actually may no longer be with us because he was on the way down very quickly. But they had wanted me to go to his bedside to hear his last confession. And so, after a quiet time together and a moment of prayer, and of course at that occasion one gives the apostolic indulgence for a person at the point of death, so that he goes in with the maximum into the beyond. Then I called the friend who had taken me there in, and we had a few last words before we went on to see actually somebody else, my novice master down in Roscrea, who also has severe cancer. That's another story. And I noticed one thing, actually two things. First of all, before we went, this good priest, who was still completely lucid, had time in all his weakness to get us bent in two with some funny story. Wow! And then I heard on the grapevine that same day, as we were driving back, there had been some texting or phoning going on, that a friend, I think a cousin of his, had been there and said, he's in great peace. Now, peace and joy go together and are the fruit of what? A clean bill of health, lightness of conscience. You can't get it by a shortcut. And people out there are trying to do that all the time by blocking out the messages of the conscience with distraction and confounding joy with physical pleasure. When I got back to Roscrea, it's as though time had stood still. Nothing had changed in the old Abbey church, and in the twilight only the same lamp of the tabernacle was still burning, and the sound of silence was there in the country of Tipperary, complete with the familiar odour of incense, for they use much thereof in the Abbey church. And I reflected on the graces of the past, perhaps missed. And one parallel one came to mind. It was the dead there that we had watched and waited and sent into the beyond. When a novice there, I had been put to work with one of the saints of the community, because one knows on the grapevine that some are very close to the Lord. It was dear Father Canis. He had entered very young and was very, very austere with himself, and even more austere actually after the mitigation after Vatican II, so as to make up. The result was that he damaged his health and died at the age of 74. But as in the case of any monk who dies in a Cistercian monastery, he's not left alone either before or after. And there in the chapter room he was exposed, all night of course. And there he was, asleep in the Lord, looking at us in the chapter where he had prayed for so many years. And it was our duty as brethren, because it was a big community, to go in twos for an hour each, that is, a pair each for 1 hour each time, with the psalter in our hand. And then when the next couple would come in, we'd pass on the psalter and point with our finger how far we'd got to it. The psalter was said without a break until he was put in the ground. But it was midnight because the novices had the difficult times at night, and we were dropping to sleep, and a fellow novice whispered to the effect that let's go and make a bait on the pantry and sort of keep awake. So off we went and swiped a few Kit Kats and something to keep us awake, and munched and drank the same next to Father Canis. So anyway, when it came to confession the following weekend, I went to dear Father Lawrence, who later became Abbot Lawrence, and muttered something to the effect of our misbehaviour in the presence of Father Canis. And I remember his remark, "You should have offered one to Father Canis." I thought, wow, that's joy in the Lord and no big drama. The Irish are quite at home with sending on a friend to the Lord, because there's joy and not tragedy in the air. Now, in the monastic journey, I've noticed this, that joy is the test of a good community. It's also the best advertisement possible for vocations. I had friends in Rome who are in a big abbey in California, St. Michael's, and they're still growing quite quickly because they're very young, dynamic, severe, orthodox, and joyful. And one actually, in a public interview, said, "I entered here because I wanted something of this joy, which I could see in the brethren." And if one looks around, that is also the case. People who live together express it without any huge drama in little gestures and words, and knowing also how to bring down things which are getting dramatic. It's as old as humanity. Even Shakespeare has it. You've heard of the taming of the shrew. It's this woman who can't be tamed, and they get to bring her down a bit and put her back in her place. We have this remark from Lucentio with regard to this woman towards the end of the play. "At last, though long, our jarring notes agree, and time it is, when raging war is done, to smile at scapes and perils overblown." In other words, nuclear warfare can be brought down a bit with a little joke. Remember that trick, because life is too short to be going from one cosmic issue to the next. I've noticed actually that is something which also opens hearts. If a person of no faith meets you on the level of your humanity and feels healed and invited to come in, you've got that person for eternity. The first advert is that of our personality and humanity. Remember that when it comes to what the Lord may ask you to do to save a soul. Respect, honor what you find before you, and be, in the name of the Lord, as humanly warm as you can possibly be. And then you may have a word which will go further, but not before. This experience of joy is something which all believers in the Lord have in some way found, even actually under duress, severe illness, pain and torture. Thomas More at the block Have respect for my beard, good executioner, for surely it has done none harm. Now, I just picked this up this week. It was something which sort of concerns you, because a couple of years ago we had the television race, and it is interesting to notice what actually they noticed about us. Now remember, these were 6 ultra-Protestants, and it is very interesting to see the reaction in print of a Protestant minister when it comes to the worship of a Catholic High Mass. I will repeat 1 or 2 things to you, because without knowing it, you are actually doing just that for a large congregation 2 years ago. He picked up that this was all for the Lord. There was no dressing up, there was no contact, it was purely vertical. There was an authenticity there which he was able to pick up straight away. And do you know what he said? It is something which took him straight back to his youth, when he felt his vocation in a simple country church like the one we had there in Stockholm at the time. It was no frills, just God, and he was touched by grace again. Now that's interesting coming from a Presbyterian minister. Remember, grace has a way of getting through. But this person also gave a few testimonies in this book. Things which precisely are indications of what Christian joy does in unexpected zones. He has in this book several preachers and heroes of the Lord, and one of them was his roommate when they were at the equivalent of the seminary, the theological college in Aberystwyth, where I lived also. And he goes into the kind of things that they would do. Now remember, these were people of great, profound faith. They would pray together with great intensity, as I know, and yet this joy would come out in such unexpected ways. As you may or may not know, if, at least in those days, one was going into the ministry, one was automatically a teetotaler, not a drop of alcohol, especially if one was heading for the ministry. So one day, what did this particular hero of the Lord do when he was the equivalent of a seminarian? He went to the room of the big boss, professor, and those therefore were able to stop them from being ordained, and he dipped in white paint the imprint of a shoe which he'd made, and made it go from the professor's room right across the street to the pub in a straight line, and come back in a big, big zigzag, to such an extent that the police were alerted, and there was a legal affair as to who was responsible for getting this erased, because it would not go away from the Tower Macadam. And it was a fight between the seminary, the authorities of Aberystwyth, and the culprit whom they couldn't find until he actually died. That, my friends, if you like, is bringing it down a bit. Because even in the tension of war years, people had joy in the Lord. And I am sure that that's what brought the morale of the English nation through the war, that they were able to stand back and see it happening and see it in the correct key. Even if my house is blowing up, I'm still here to tell the tale. And we, my friends, mess up not only our joy, but that of everyone around us by zooming in on something which is what? Important, so important that we've lost the quality of life. But remember, joy is not just human, it is actually divine. Because we, here on earth, once in a state of grace, have something which puts us in a different category from those who are not in a state of grace. It's what? The bottom line is that we know where we're going, and if we die now, we're safe. If you're going through life with anxiety in the back of your mind that I'm not ready to go, do what you like, you can't get joy. So hang on to that, my my friends, remember there is no joy without this conscience sorted out. Never go through the day not in a state of peace with your Maker. If you do, that moment of time is without merit and without luster on your copybook. I just finish. When it comes to negotiating with a difficult person, one has a choice. One can get into that person's game, which is going to be dysfunctional, destructive of the peace, or one can do what? One can listen to the still small voice whispering in our hearts saying, don't get involved. Because on a daily basis, we're up against people who are trying, directly or indirectly, to take away our peace and therefore our joy. Be careful of unpeaceful souls. Handle them with care, but don't get into their game. The big way to bring it down is to relativize and bring in, yes, that gift which the Lord has given us to detonate the bomb, the sense of humor.